First of all, my name is Harper Lee. I'm 23 years old. I just recently received my diploma in biological sciences dealing with the environment at the University of Chicago. It ought to have been nothing but a day full with happiness. One day, the moment I was finally able to keep my head up high after 4 years of unrelenting focus on academics, proud of the fact that I had finally demonstrated my value. I am In terms of renting, the parents had spent no cost. The opulent rooftop of the building where the Chicago's peninsula, where the city lights will be seen, gleamed right in front of our feet. There is a modest, classical pieces were performed by the orchestra, and the delicate cuisine was handed around on plates. To an infinite degree among the guests. Each and every one was immaculate and so extravagant that it seemed unbelievable. Not to mention the fact that only a few weeks ago, they, who had referred to me as a youngster who was useless, would never be worthy of earning the family's respect. After that, however, in the midst of all of that, I experienced both laughing and congrats, something that kept my heart from beating. At the time when a pre-mixed cocktail was placed in front of the server, a fleeting, almost fleeting glance captured my eyes. The movement that comes from my mother's instincts, this is Victoria Lee. Diamond rings adorning her hand, slanted ever so slightly, and I noticed a peculiar white powder is able to be slipped into the clear as liquid. A split second later, the event took place. Kind of moment that may be experienced by anyone else, yet I didn't miss it at all. Instantaneously, the blood became icy. The plan was in place, that is. In the presence of everyone else, my own mother attempted to bring about my demise by using the same praised by society as being those of the hand the generous lady of Chicago was. I was unable to quake and shake. I was unable to keep it a secret. I grabbed the glass and smiled at everyone who was there, faces anticipating the ideal cheers to be delivered moment. But at that moment, when every eye was still on me, I gently turned around and handed it over. To my sister Sophia, I raise my glass to you, a brilliant gem that my parents have always cherished. My tone was light as I said, "You deserve this more," almost mocking, and Sophia grinned, in the absence of a glass, lifting the glass and drinking. After giving it some thought, that evening beneath the shimmering lights of Chicago, it dawned on me that the shimmering lights of Chicago revealed the dreadful reality regarding my own biological family, the same exact individuals who were attempting to ruin me. Before I proceed, I would like to take a moment to halt. And I have a question for you. Please tell me in the comments, mention the location where you are watching, and allow me to ask you as well. Have you been able to? When was the last time you had to defend your own worth? When the person who was hurting you was someone else from one's own family? I was born and reared in this family, within a family that was cherished by the external world. Chicago is the ideal model, as the saying goes. Richard Lee, the father, was well known for being one of the most successful business people in the pharmaceutical industry in the state of Illinois, including the chief executive officer of Lee Pharmaceuticals, a company that the media has reported on remained unceasing in their praise as the pride of healthcare industry in the United States of America. Featured on the cover of Forbes and delivered a speech at extravagant conferences. And I was invited to attend delivering a presentation on business strategy at renowned universities. But most importantly, behind all of this admiration was directed toward a man who was icy, someone who was calculated and who has never placed family above profit. Sophia and I are referring to him not daughters of his own flesh, and not his own children, that we were chess pieces, evidence that we were blood. The ideal family business had been established by him. Victoria, my mother, was not an exception to this rule. Having come from a distinguished family, she was a medicine that has been passed down over generations. Since she was a little girl, she was instructed that repute, social standing, and refined taste surpassed all other considerations in importance. Was the kind of woman whose periodicals she read, At all times, photographs were altered to perfection, the kind of person who sought perfection in everything. An appearance in public inspires awe in the audience. Sophia was, in her opinion, the ideal candidate. This is the continuance of the Lee lineage. Brilliant and graceful, a Harvard Business School expert, high school graduate who has received exceptional honors, and rapidly ascending to a management position throughout the organization. At every event, my mother introduced me to every photo shoot. Therefore, Sophia is the legitimate heir. Family. And I, on the other hand, was just Harper. I have a second daughter who was never good enough for me. I can vividly recall the look on my parents' eyes. Was the first time I became aware of the distinction. I was in elementary school when I had this experience. I ran in a cross-country race, and to compete in the race, a silver medal was awarded to me for my own surprise. I fled home in a state of elation, hoping that my parents will be pleased. But the instant I went into the room, I entered the living room, I noticed that they were popping champagne, a celebration with the reason that Sophia was selected to do a performance on the piano at a community gathering, and my father presented me with a medal. After giving it a short glance, I nodded and remarked, "Good, but don't deceive yourself into thinking that you are good," assuming that running would ever be beneficial to you. The phrase career was not even lifted by my mother off of the dress that she was trying on at the time. It was on that day that I realized the significance of acknowledgement. A member of this family would never be suitable for me. When they were in high school, partiality became. Clearly, Sophia was the most prominent figure in her entire life. She was the captain of the debate team, tennis champion, student who has received a perfect score. And each and every time she accomplished something, parties were thrown by the entire family, and they posed for pictures, for photographs, and I noticed her name in the book. The walls of our home were also covered in local paper. Sophia's achievements from the past are covered. Photographing her as she was clutching a tennis trophy to Harvard's framed letter of honor from the university. And as for me, I was able to achieve perfect ratings science honors as well, but mine turned out to be hidden away in a drawer. I will never take it out. Forget about the little moment when my mother truly attended one of the science fairs that I hosted. When I was a sophomore, I happened to win first place in all of the state for the purpose of my research on the effect that antibiotics have on the water in ponds. I anxiously awaited her embrace, frantically hoping for it. Yet when they delivered me the accolades, she was not pleased. Reward and took pictures, she persisted in her stance, leaned very close to me and said, "You look at me." Very messy. As if they were some kind of stray child. Is not appropriate at this place. Her words cut direct through me, destroying the joy I was feeling that had only recently started to blossom. My parents never, ever inquired about what it was that I want. They had already devised a plan for themselves. Harper would research drugs, become a member of the company, employment as a researcher in order to provide assistance to her sister. Every other dream I had, about my sister's leadership, had been a load of crap, I told them once more, and I once again stated that I cherished the atmosphere, that my goal was to investigate the consequences on the impact of industrial waste on ecosystems. The father waved it off with a dismissive expression. For those individuals who write ineffectively, you are required to put forth actual effort in order to make a contribution to the family. Once I was able to get into the University of Chicago for the purpose of, during his investigations of the environment, he erupted with anger, threatening to cancel all of the students' tuition support. It was only because of that, after then, financial aid in the form of student loans, the fact that I was able to maintain my position. A lot of times, I believed that I was born to be. The background of Sophia, who never failed to step onto the stage, which was illuminated by powerful lights. When I waited in the darkness, I stood there until, in order to catch a glimpse of recognition that never arrived, I was referred to as obstinate, ungrateful, and, whereas Sophia needed merely to smile in order to It is a feeling that is ingrained in my mind, inside me to such a profound degree that when I was young, I thought that I was nothing more than a shadow, and calm that is not necessary in. I was a member of the Lee family, and as I got older, as I gained a deeper comprehension of a piercing reality, that home, love was never a presence. There was no condition attached to it. In relation to whether or not you have achieved, corresponded to their anticipations, that Sophia corresponded to them and she was cherished by them. Unlike them, and I became the thorn in their side, wished to refrain from doing so. My grandmother, Margaret, was the uncommon beacon of light in the years of my life that were otherwise obscured by darkness. Childhood. During this time, my parents abandoned me. She was the only one who paid no attention to my attempts, was the only one who could see me for who I really am. She was a source of solace, and a remarkable woman who lived many decades Before her birth, she had already been one of the chemists in Illinois who are among the most successful. Her work had been recognized with important research awards in the pharmaceutical industry, paving the path for increasing the number of novel chemicals for treatment. Curiously, it was her early discoveries that led to this, so laying the groundwork for what would come later. Later on, Lee Pharmaceuticals was established. Nevertheless, in each and every company's archives, nowhere in the beautiful booklet could her name be found. I can still remember the time she kidnapped me to the basement of her house, which was an ancient one. He then opened a wooden trunk that was covered in dust. There were piles of study notes scribbled in her writing style, which is both graceful and powerful. Informed me that those equations had resulted in the very first medication for the relief of pain. In the past, the father's business would launch itself. "They stole my work," she murmured with a wistful expression. He smiled and then removed my name off the list. Every single photograph, every single certificate, for the simple reason that I was a female, Harper. During that time, men did not believe that women could standing on a same footing with males in the laboratory. My little heart was both enraged and enraged by that. While in pain, I inquired of her, "Do you feel regret?" Not. As she gazed at me, her eyes shone with a ferocious spark. Number, with the reason that science and helping others is more important than gaining fame. Individuals. But it is a sorrow that I let others to determine the value of me. There was Grandma Margaret, not even close to my own parents, in the event that my father experienced things solely through the perspective of... She looked at people with regards to profit and power. Toward the generations to come, she never failed to tell me. I told her, never allow anyone to tell you that you are without passion. There is no purpose. If you love when it comes to the environment, you should follow it. Fight. Keep fighting and avoid becoming anyone's enemy, not even the shadow of this. Shadow, shadow, shadow. Those phrases became my compass while I was growing up, the thing that kept me moving forward in every situation. I was reprimanded by my father, or my mother tore my hair out, down on me. Things that my parents were unaware of. It wasn't until one day that my grandmother had a surprise present ready for me to receive. Back when I was a child, she frequently told me that one day, a day when I would be liberated, when I would have the ability to never rely on anyone else for support. To me, it seemed like it was just her way of, I am being comforted. However, in reality, she had in a stealthy manner established a trust fund, value $10 million are solely in my name. The circumstances were unambiguous. If the money were to only be freed after I have completed my education, college, or my 25th birthday, whichever came first, in the future. It wasn't merely a pass-through inheritance, was the means by which I was able to escape this hold that parents have. That is when I became aware of it. She had only turned 16 years old when she passed suddenly. I was called into her chamber, and she grasped my hand, clenching her hand hard, her eyes hazy with disease, yet still radiating with pride despite it. "I won't allow you to spend any money," she said. "Harper, you are unable to escape this vicious loop of, 'It is unfair.' Make a promise to me, regardless of the circumstances, happens, you will proceed down the route that you have chosen. Decide on. You must not allow someone to buy you off, or you are compelled to." I didn't have a complete understanding at the time. I did not comprehend, but I did nod. 1 or 2 months. In the end, she had left, leaving me with a dilemma, a profound aching that never went away. My mom and dad remained unaware of the trust until 3 or real threat. Moreover, I started to understand that it wasn't merely a trust money like that, inheritance for me that was left by my grandmother. It was unequivocal evidence that she thought I was in a position to accomplish so much more, that she placed the trust that she has in my honesty. Although the entire Lee family's universe was on the subject of power and wealth, Margaret, further responsibility was given to me, which was the obligation to break the cycle of abuse and neglect. It was this secret, in conjunction with those other I discovered some information on the company's the dumping of poisonous waste, which made me a target. Parents did not simply wish to reclaim their rights, $10 million in total. There was a desire to safeguard an empire that belonged to my grandmother through inadvertent construction with her, but that they had stolen in the process of brilliance a name. Furthermore, in their opinion, the only way to ensure the safety of everything was to take me away, completely removed from the game. I was able to find the illegal dumping of harmful waste by the corporation during the last semester I spent studying at the University of... When I was given the opportunity to participate in a field research initiative that is funded by the Department of Environmental Science in collaboration with a local conservation agency, KLAT was the location of the research. River, a narrow body of water that cuts through of the city. There are various industrial zones. Side of Chicago, which has been documented for a long time as a potential for contamination to occur. I went with an endeavor that is not solely motivated by scientific passion, but due to the fact that I had a perception that is unwavering and nearly instinctive. Something that was waiting to happen there was there, not concealed. In the beginning, the task was to collect water and sediment on a systematic basis, taking samples and bringing them back to the laboratory for analysis. In addition to the other students, I determined the levels of dissolved oxygen and pH. In addition, heavy metals were examined. I am correct. From the very beginning of the exams, I observed the discrepancies are really concerning. Levels of mercury and lead were significantly higher than those set forth by the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. We delved deeper, and the more distressing the area became. A result was created. We started looking for signs of substances that are used in pharmacological therapy, molecules that are synthetic. I immediately industry highlighted from the reading sector, journals and journals. In most cases, these chemicals only appear in wastewater that has not been treated from factories that produce pharmaceuticals. As soon as I relayed my findings to the person supervising me, Professor, he gave a serious nod of his head. We have had this suspicion for a long time, but never before has there been sufficient scientific data to have conclusive evidence of it.
given that I was thinking of something at that same moment. In the first place, I was afraid to do so. Is it possible? It is the business that my own father founded. Lee Pharmaceuticals? Could it have been the pharmaceutical industry? I quietly devoted myself to the weeks that followed, additional time for comparing the samples of water originating from various parts of the river. This current brought me closer to an object. On the western side, there is an industrial complex. A sign that read West was placed on the sign, a facility known as Lee Pharmaceuticals. The moment I read those lines, my heart began to race. It seemed as though everything I was discovering was I am pointing directly back at my biological family. I initiated further investigation. I looked for it using the facility's public reports on the subject of the treatment of wastewater. However, the records were stuffed with numerals that appeared to appear impeccable. They were perfect in every way. I cannot believe, a result of my internship, I was aware that no process had ever gone smoothly. An event was taking place, concealed. I discreetly snapped photographs and kept them, in addition to recording everything, sample data, in a confidential notebook with great care. Day by day, the evidence accumulated day by day. In the samples gathered just outside the gates of the plant's collection, I discovered exceedingly high levels of cyclopentyl, a recently developed medicine, a chemical that has not been part of the standard tests, but there was one that I was familiar with without delay.
It remained the same. I had read about an experimental medicine in the source, internally conducted research by the company, the documents. It was impossible for it to even appear. Accidentally found there, it was only possible for it to have belonged to the Lee Pharmaceuticals Company areas of research. I experienced a twisting sensation in my tummy by tying knots. When I was younger, I was a scientist who was motivated by the truth. As an alternative, this was my family, the business that my dad owned, a location where Sophia was currently holding a management job or employment. If I were to go all out, to do so would be the same as turning a gun on myself. Bloodline. After that, however, I recalled my granny's remarks. Never let someone to choose what you are worth. If she were still alive, I was aware that she would want me to do what was appropriate. In the evening, I sat by myself. While I was in my dorm room, I was looking at the pile of information. I was very aware of the fact that if those thousands of people who remained silent, to reside in the vicinity of the Calumet River, would proceed to endure the repercussions of such actions. Not only can polluted water cause, but it also, cancer. It causes ecosystems to mutate, and it eradicates, in addition to poisons, fish populations in the future generations to come. I was unable. I will stop looking at it. My choice was to talk to my folks about it. Then, during one of we just sat down to have dinner on a few rare occasions, it was together that I mustered up all of my bravery and the printed test results should be distributed across. It is the table. I am familiar with the name of the company. Using the West facility as a location, I remarked, my voice that was solid but quivering. I am in possession of data. I possess the evidence. Without putting a stop to I will file a report about the illegal dumping, all of the table's contents tumbled into a fatal, there is no sound. My father cautiously raised his head. With his eyes, he looked down from his glass of wine. The blades are sharp. She was pressed by my mother, pressed her lips together tightly, her hands squeezed tightly in her lap. Only Sophia glanced at it, startled, her eyes widening in disbelief as she looked at me. At long last, Richard Lee emerged, his voice audible, low, and the temperature is low. You are not aware of what is wrong. What are you saying, Harper? A few items are there, far larger than you are aware of. This particular family has been able to endure due to silence. In light of thee, I did not bend my head for the very first time. There is no such thing as familial silence, I responded with a shot. Silence is the same as complicity. From that point forward, I was aware that I had embarked on a course that had no comeback. I immediately started gathering everything. Two kinds of data that are identical. Photos of thee, in addition to samples, thorough time logs, and the location. Every one of them was kept on an encrypted hard drive in the event that the worst possible outcome occurred. Having known my parents would not allow this to go unnoticed. In addition to that, I was aware of the fact that this decision, in conjunction with the inherited property that my grandma had bequeathed me, caused me to become the only source of contention inside the Lee family. It was impossible for them to escape. There was a throbbing sensation in my head, and that premonition came true a few weeks later, grew into a reality. In the aftermath of that altercation, this caused a change in the mood among my household. Odd way. In the past, not a single phone call, with each and every weekend gathering having been with reprimands for the manner in which the family did not receive any benefits from the field. I didn't want to work as an intern for the company. However, only a few days after I had the courage to lay down statistics on the environment presented at the dinner table, in addition to stating that I will report them, a complete shift in tone occurred. To my mother, began making more frequent phone calls, but no longer interrogating my grades or putting pressure on me regarding plans for one's career. In its place, she inquired which kinds of flowers I desired to be placed on which tables were available at my graduation dinner, meals that I enjoyed so that the chef might replicate them. They are. It was even my father who sent me a brief text. Congrats in advance on your success. You have accomplished a worthy goal. When I read those words, it caused a shiver to run down my spine to the bone. In my entire life, my father had never once commended me. Living, I was not brought about by this transformation. To feel at ease, all it did was make me more suspicions are raised. Apparently, they were going to throw a large-scale celebration held on the roof of the Chicago Peninsula, where each and every glass wall that opened out to a panoramic vista of the city on all sides. You are deserving of a ceremony that is worthy of you, my mother remarked to me in a pleasant voice over the phone. Her tone was so sweet that it sounded artificial. I forged a courteous smile that she was unable to see, a response that was, "Yes, thank you, Mom." However, I had no idea what my parents were doing, deep down, ever came without any conditions connected to it. Throughout the last several days before I graduated, I lost myself in the process of completing my group's file study while also paying close attention to putting together a strategy to safeguard myself. I backed up a single copy of the environmental data was left behind. Another one on my list is at the university, a third using my personal hard drive, and a fourth at my professor in charge of supervision, just in case I happen to vanish without a trace. I didn't tell anyone about it, even Emily and Noah, who are my closest friends, the companions. I didn't want them to join in on the action. Danger. When I went home for the evening, I was there just a few evenings before I was to graduate. I had dinner. I happened to overhear a heated argument by accident. In the corner of my father's study, behind the door, I was on the verge of walking by when I suddenly stopped. The voice of my mother, which was filled with concern. "Is it absolutely necessary for you to do this, Richard? Suppose someone discovers the truth." "It is my father's." A low and harsh tone was present. "Get it, don't you? Currently, she possesses sufficient evidence. Include, on top of that, the inheritance and additional, she will never again rely on us for anything. To her, could result in the ruin of the entire enterprise. As her mother responded, her voice was shaking slightly. "She is nevertheless our daughter." "Not at all.
that is my father. Put an end to her. She poses a danger. It is the FDA's. A covert probe has already been initiated. If once Harper speaks, we are completely thrown off. My heart was beating, and I held my breath, aggressively. Each and every phrase dropped like a hit to the head. After that, the father's voice became more subdued, yet it was still sufficient for me to be able to hear it. The plan is as follows. The sole purpose of making her ill for a few days, establish a hospital for her, and while that was going on, at the appropriate time, we will handle the paperwork, take care of the records. Should the worst event occur, in the event that she passes away before the trust is established, once the money is released, it will return to us. Yes, that is the law. Behind me, I stood motionless. The door, a steady stream of icy sweat dripping down my skin. Plans were being made by my own parents They brought me, the daughter, and they poisoned me by way of this world. Plus, it wasn't just that. With regard to the 10 million, it concerned the putting an end to the reality that I felt about the located in the West. During that same moment, I desired to rush in the door and shout. One more voice, however, the voice from within, said, "Number. If they know, you have heard that they will find a different way." Something that was even more horrific. I retreated. The act of compelling myself to go back to the living room and act as if I hadn't heard anything in that time. On that particular occasion, Sophia sat next to me, conversing with a positive attitude about her job for the business.
After then, she inquired as to whether, after I graduate, I intend to submit an application to an international environment arrangement of things. There was a look on her face, bright, self-assured, and yet so delightfully content, not aware of the plan that our parents had. It is to me, at that moment, there had been no participation from Sophia, according to that discussion. She came out as totally a different entity from their scheming. As for her, I remained the estranged older sister, but although she, always the adversary. As I listened to her chuckle, my chest became more constricted. A portion of me harbored resentment toward her, to be cherished, to be cared for, to receive love that is not conditional, but some other aspect of that I wanted to safeguard her in order to guarantee on no occasion did she become collateral in our power games played by parents. I was aware of that. Within a short period of time, everything would explode. The result of the in the open air, the days that brought about grading, appeared to be a happy and colorful occasion, but they weighed heavy on my shoulders like a black cloud, the fog. Gentle and smiling, my parents spoke to me frequently. However, each and every word and gesture conspired to spread a lie. On my person was a continual worry that the celebration that they were arranging will not go as planned, intended not to honor me, but rather to put an end to me. What was even more terrifying was the fact that they were unable to inform anyone, not even the people I loved, because it was possible for anyone to get hauled down alongside me. It was at that time when I realized that the fight for my life had resulted in the beginning, and it would be necessary for me, Harper Lee, to strive to reach the truth by walking by yourself. The evening of my graduation party, at long last, came to be. I emerged from the glass as I was leaving, a lift that leads up to the rooftop of the building. In regard to the peninsula Chicago, I was almost overpowered by the extravagantness that took place in front of me. Ribbons of gold-colored aglow encircled each column in its entirety. Tables for banquets that are covered in spotless white linen, decorated with imported linen. The linen stood an orchid. An ensemble consisting of tiny mouths played gentle tunes that blended seamlessly with the melody, the faint sound of glasses clinking together. To external observers, the scene constituted evidence of prosperity, a show of affection that is very stunning from an influential family paying tribute to a daughter. On the other hand, every flickering was candle seemed like a flame that was just ready to deceive my heart and consume it with its lies. Almost all of the attendees were people who had been seen before, the commercial community of Chicago. I was able to recognize the partners of my father, dressed in a striking manner, members of the executive team, powerful attorneys who had been of service to our family for many years, but even a few local reporters and periodical publications. Amidst the vastness of the attendees, a small group of newcomers, only a few individuals, had a genuine claim to me. Both Noah and Emily exhibiting a slight lack of appropriateness in a gown and suit released. They made haste to me, indulging me in hugs of affection and congratulation, and I mustered a smile for him, expressing my gratitude in silence that at least I wasn't fully isolated, that I was still in possession of persons who really cared. While I was speaking with my companions, I could sense the gaze of my parents was always fixed on me, exhibiting even a slight faltering. It is their presence exerted pressure on me, much like a weight of two hawks circling their prey while keeping a watchful eye on every single action and every single phrase that left my lips. When I moved from one position to another, they used the subtlest of maneuvers to keep me contained. They are able to see them. Their smiles last while remaining in place, yet the rigidity of their lips, as well as the contemplative twinkle in their eyes, the eyes, conveyed a different narrative. I had matured accustomed to their icy demeanor over the course of several years. Tonight, however, their look brought with it something more than just power. It was the source of the odor of a strategy. I became aware of my surroundings. The father is bending in close to whisper something to Gerald, the lifelong employee of the company. The attorney. Gerald gave a slight nod and then looked at me with the cold, discerning, and evaluative stare of someone evaluating a product that is about to be promoted open for bidding. I felt a chill roll down my spine. Throughout my entire existence, the man had been my contract drafting, done by the right hand of the father, closing any legal gap and protecting our interests, the business, from being scrutinized. If he were to... It wasn't only to be here tonight, it was to congratulate me on my graduation. When Sophia showed up at my side, beaming with a smile that has never changed, after raising her champagne glass, she continued, I felt a little tap on the shoulder from somebody. Sister, people are often questioning me about your situation. Plans for the time after graduates. How come they are so... Do you find yourself infatuated with that? The parents continued to, it being brought up over and over again. As I regarded Sophia and observed the purity that she possessed, eyes that were tinged with a sliver of worry, she continued to be unable to comprehend the reality behind everything that is going on. There was a tightening in my chest, emotions that are jumbled up and rushing, in part fury at her unending favoritism in the eyes of others, a portion the fact that she failed to recognize that she was only an additional thing regarding our parents' the board for chess. I mustered up a smile and then said, it's likely in their best interest to double-check. I will act in a manner that is appropriate for the group. Sophia wore a frown. Then again, isn't this your currently? I don't see why they aren't asking whether you're or what you intend to accomplish. Not even close. Question cut me like a knife through my chest. I turned away from her, sipping my water in an effort to avoid responding to. It was then that I caught sight of it. I was the focus of my mother's attention, and she smiled. It is as rigid as wax. She stood in the middle of a group, with regard to women in society, her glass of wine glistening in her hand, but paying attention to it, not a single one of my actions ever wavered. To her, had been a brilliant performer in ever since they were a woman of the people, a member of the public, she was a favorite of the press to call. However, I was aware of the reality. On the other side of that flawless mask was a queen possessing a heart of stone, willing to give up anyone, as well as her own daughter, in order to protect her splendor. I had to force myself to take a deep breath, me to maintain my composure. Each and every one of my senses alerted to a significant degree.
I was aware that I was standing within the realm of predators, and I was the one to catch. I can hear people laughing and chatting all around me, dissolved into a murky murmur in the distance, leaving only the rapid beating of my heart was audible in my chest. Momentarily, the notebook came to my mind, packed with data from water samples that I had tucked away in places. Since the beginning of my life, it is still possible that the truth will be revealed. It's possible that this was the reason why because of my parents' decision, I had to be, this evening, eliminated. On the other hand, I did not quake and shake. I already aware their conversation plan of action. I had prepared myself, and I vowed to, personally, I would not allow them to prevail. Therefore, a breeze. Once again, the party had reached its greatest stage. The radiant golden light spread forth. Over the rooftop, shining brightly against the other, immaculate white tablecloths laid over round tables of fabric, all placed in a circle around as the stage. The mellow tones of jazz performed live wandered away from the band that was playing in the corner, combining the delicate with the woven together, crystal glasses making a clinking sound. I took a quick look over here. Every one of the visitors was present, members of the business community, a few journalists, and of course, there is also the family attorney. Everyone waited for the moment to lift a toast to the Lee brothers and their glasses, the student who has been honored by the family, or more accurately, in honor of Sophia rather than me. Emily was sitting there in the outfit that was navy blue that had made the decision for me. My heart was upset because of my parents were there when the evening started.
Hadn't taken their eyes off me. The motion that I made gave the impression that it was using a magnifying glass each time I spoke, etc. When my father was with a visitor, his eyes flickered near me, but then abruptly moved away as I approached. Leaning very close, he whispered something to the person, counsel for families, the gentleman with silver hair, as the thin glasses sparkled in the light of the illuminations. After that, the time that I had dreaded has at long last emerged. His father stood up, to his feet, while maintaining his unassuming expression, identical one that had deceived me into believing that I used to put my faith in him when I was a kid. But this simply served to send a shiver down my spine. It was a signal that he made with his hands to offer out a nice experience for the servers, box made of wood. There was a bottle of red wine there, wine that is presented in the manner of a bar, priceless gem that cannot be replaced. This, he started with a voice that is deep and resonant with pride, is a bottle that is strictly reserved for the most significant occasions that belong to our family, a Harper. Now that she has graduated, her future looks brilliant. Nothing could possibly be more appropriate. This moment is more worthy of celebration than this. A wine that is extremely rare and valuable. The guests all erupted in laughter. Applause is the response. They chuckled and increased their voices, their mobile devices in order to record this alleged wonderful time spent with family. Of course, I smiled as well. There was something that ached violently inside my chest. Immediately, I became aware of it. Daddy of mine, as is customary, did not allow the servers to pour. He was the one who opened the bottle, and all of the glasses were filled with meticulous attention. The hand. In front of me was the glass that had been set. Just a little bit, I cocked it, and my heart clasped with great force. In the swirling, deep red color, there was a faint shimmering of fine dust that I saw. When the light's on, particles that have not yet broken down. My heartbeat was pounding in my chest. Listen to, those were the remarks that I had overheard. A surge of people arrived the night before. Simply put, adequate poison to cause her to become ill, stayed in the hospital for a few days. It is time to move the assets around. My throat became parched. I managed to keep my smile unruffled and unshaken. I took a quick look around. Despite appearances, my mother talked to the women that are standing next to her. However, I was never absent from her gaze.
My dad brought me up. I am waiting for him to follow me with his glass. In During that stressful moment, I leaned ever so little forward, a little bit, and gently tapped Emily's fingers underneath. It is the table. My eyes met hers as she looked up. Gaze, eyes loaded with a combination of pleading and resolutely. I scarcely moved my lips as I spoke. "Record this. Record this," she whispered. Emily uttered the smallest of words. "Everything." I nod. She placed her phone aside in a stealthy manner, placed it in her lap, and then she took her clutch, set the camera with a single touch that is unobtrusive, in a rolling position with the table in view. "Two," my father told me, "Harper," and his voice was loud, reverberating around the rooftop. Invited guests reverberated the crowd's applause and cheers to fill the atmosphere. I raised my glass up. As she sat next to me, Sophia flashed a grin, radiantly, her face glistening with the light of pride, having not the slightest hint of suspicion. One of never had a glimpse of the shadowy edge of our parents. They never dreamed that they could cause harm to children of their own. The eyes of my father, prompting me to take a drink of water, I made a drawing in a maintain a steady breath, then abruptly turned to Sophia. My voice was gentle and full of care. "Sister, I want you to know that this is not only my day. You have been on my side through all 4 of these years spent in college, urging me to continue while I was feeling exhausted. I have something to share with you. Along with you, this bliss." I gave a friendly grin and then handed a toast to Sophia, please. The attendees applauded with approval, despite the fact that it was nothing more than just a friendly act of sisterly affection. "Oh, Harper, you're amazing!" Sophia exclaimed, her voice bursting with excitement. When feeling is involved, she snatched the glass away from me. There is not the slightest bit of uncertainty. I is quick to, her glass, which was the transparent one, was lifted, as well as bringing it to my mouth. Given that instantly both of my parents became pale, is the color drained out of their faces with unrestrained abandon. I am mother stuttering, just partially reaching out to them. Put a stop to it, but it was already too late. In front of scores of guests, as well as the phones involved throughout the process of recording, they were unable to do that is. Then Sophia cocked her head to the side and drank in a single full gulp. "Delicious!" she exclaimed, spoken with a jovial laugh, completely and absolutely oblivious to the substance that she had just consumed. The volume of the song increased once more. Those who were present, they went back to their chats, but they were out. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of a pair of parents standing still. They compelled them to. Everyone smiled and applauded in unison with the throng. However, their hands were shaking. A family unit. The attorney leaned very close to whisper something, his own face, which was displaying signs of terror. I placed as the glass is placed lightly on the table and grinned in a composed manner. To the right of the table, Emily's hand was held firmly in his hold. It is the camera. Was still filming, attempting to get the full, to trade, both the flickering and the glass switch. I saw a look of horror in my parents' eyes, a lowering of my head, and whispered at a volume that was just right for Emily to take note of. "This is the evidence, sealed up. Now they will have to play by my rules, the rules." The rooftop was alive with activity. The night air was filled with the sound of jazz, while the sound of glasses chimes in the background, the laughter that spills forth in fits, the glittering lights reflected off of the high buildings of Chicago glass skyline as your backdrop. I maintained a calm expression on my face. Even though my heart was beating so strongly on the inside, I had the impression that it was going to break my ribs. I had just made a move that was so audacious that I personally had a hard time believing that. Then I had handed the unique glass that had been poured by I was holding Sophia's hand, and now all I could do had no choice but to wait and see what would happen.
develop. A period of 10 minutes had elapsed. There were no incidents. She laughed, Sophia, brightly, vigorously shaking hands with visitors, going so far as to boast that our family was taking steps to entrust her with more responsibility duties that are required by the organization. As I stood, far over on the side, listening in silence, observing at a distance, from time to time, my eyes darted toward Sophia, and I was able to see her, at the uncertainty that lies beyond their forced, tight pressing of their lips, smiles, and grins. Their fear was palpable. I aware of it. After that, about 10 minutes later, the shift occurred with started out. And Sophia, who was always perfect in every way, when she was calm, she abruptly placed her palm over her chest area. Her face had lost all of its color. As she was leaving, a buddy said, "Are you okay?" She swayed in an unsteady manner. "Only a little bit, I'm sorry," Sophia mumbled. "I'm dizzy," while choking back a delicate smile. However, in any given moment, it was a cold sweat that flowed down her skin. Her makeup was streaked in dark lines down her cheeks. Her face, I remained still, and my heart was racing, held tightly with a tense grip. Regardless of how the sight of Sophia made me feel resentful against her. I was still stunned with the idea of suffering like this, a sudden pang of melancholy. Yet later on, the recollections of the times she had spent with her came pouring back. My work has been stolen credit for. The times when my mother and father stood up for her and ignored me. Moreover, the fact that our parents are here tonight had intended for me to be poisoned by the substance. "It is going too fast," and Sophia gasped, before suddenly plummeting onto the bottom of the and screams could be heard throughout the entire celebration. The guests lurched backwards in a state of terror, called out in a desperate manner for assistance. "Dial 911, it was someone who yelled out. "Get an ambulance now!" Emily swiftly moved forward and kneeled down next to Sophia. Strangely, I was the most calm of all the people. Another. In the midst of the mayhem, I leaned close to Emily. The words, "Send the video," were murmured by Emily. Presently, "Store a copy of it on the cloud. Don't allow let it get lost," Emily yelled out in a fast nod. Her hands were shaking, but strong, with the purpose of securing the evidence on her phone. The sirens of the ambulances were drowned out through the night in Chicago more quickly than I could anticipate. Paramedics rushed at the scene as was anticipated, with a stretcher and emergency supplies on the rooftop. A piece of apparatus, Sophia was positioned, and her eyes were twitching and her face was eerily pale. Half closed, she is having a hard time taking a breath. "An arrhythmia of the heart," yelled one of the medics. "A trip to Northwestern Memorial Hospital is required." I went straight to the hospital, and I stepped forward, maintaining my proximity, maintaining a steady stare, and maintaining a steady voice, lucid and unwavering. "Hold on, I have some important. Please advise the medical professionals that this is the information. Highly likely a poison that is connected to an experimental substance originating from Lee Pharmaceuticals. The R17 project code for the pharmaceutical industry. What is known as cyclopentylamine is the substance, derivative number 47. The paramedics froze for a moment. Instantaneously, one of them turned to face me, taken aback by the fact that my voice was so confident. "Have you made up your mind?" I sharply nodded. My internship was in the laboratory of the corporation. The indicators, and if you do not immediately inform them, away, the medical professionals will lose valuable time. The medical professional did not hesitate, jotted down notes, and communicated the information to others by way of his radio. I took a quick look at my parents. There they stood, their expressions unmoving. A pale complexion, my mother's voice was stuttering. "Harper, what are you telling me? What are you doing? You should not disparage your own. You should not." I turned, my voice rising, and my parents like this slander.
Everyone in this room is as sharp as steel. It was clear that the bottle was selected by the father, and the physicians will confirm it very shortly. Anything and everything if there is in fact nothing to hide. What exactly are you afraid of if you choose to hide? There was complete silence in the air, and a few guests started to speak. I cast a suspicious glance in the direction of my parents. The attorney for the family stood resolutely next to his individuals, with sweat dripping from his forehead, his mouth that seemed incapable of forming a word. After the ambulance had raced away, I began to leave. However, Emily grabbed my arm and I became concerned. Her visage was inscribed with the words, "Are you sure you want to go? I am able to accompany you. The police are going to arrive at any moment." My response was, exactly why I have to leave. And my eyes, without wavering in their gaze, if I'm not there, they will manipulate the narrative and portray me in a negative light, take the role of the liar, because I am the only one who can. First and foremost, do not lie. In the event of an emergency, disarray in the room of the Northwestern Memorial Hospital, rain fell. A swarm of medical professionals and nurses arrived. Around Sophia, putting in intravenous lines, heart monitors are being attached. It is the screen. Displayed irregular spikes, and her heartbeat was in a total disarray. Everywhere. There was a doctor who frowned at the outcomes, the indications of chemical exposure, toxic substance, most likely an industrial compound, the word. I instantly entered the situation. Perhaps it is R17. One of the compounds being tested was stopped since it was causing an irregular heartbeat, not to mention respiratory failure. The Lee Pharmaceuticals was investigated for 2 years back then. Suddenly, the doctor's head snapped up, startled by the news. How did you come to this conclusion? I have conducted covert investigations into their laboratory, I gave a resolute response, for several months. In other words, the reasons why Sophia began to sweat at that very moment, her heartbeat became irregular and she was cold, I immediately noticed the signs on their own. This does not occur at random. This reaction is the standard one for the chemical that was being tested. Derivative 47 of cyclopentylamine is derived from the R17 project. The physician gave a resolute nod and issued the command. Get ready for the procedure for the experimental antidote study for MTO47 is a derivative of cyclopentylamine. Quickly. Twice. Only at that moment did the police arrive. There was an instant response from the officers, statement requests were made. The suspicion is present. There was poisoning of the sufferer. We required details provided. My father persisted in his efforts. That was a harsh voice. This is a personal home. It is a family matter. Only one of my daughters had a blood pressure that has dropped. It is not necessary. Because of interference from the cops. The officer, however, forcefully cut him off from the conversation. They have the physician's indications of chemical poisoning that have been confirmed. As of right moment, this is a criminal situation. You and I both, it is necessary for your wife to comply. I dare to try. There was a single eye in the emergency room. Moved closer to my mother and father. They attempted to maintain their composure, but the trembling in their hands utterly betrayed them in every way. I leaned forward. It's begun, she muttered toward Emily as she did so. This time, they won't be able to get away. Sophia was still unconscious, but with the help of the antidote and emergency treatment, her vitals slowly settled down. As he turned to face me, the physician's voice, that is unmoving, "It is your information. We would have lost her life if it weren't for it." I nodded in agreement. I have lost crucial minutes. Silently, that is. I experienced the sense of both relief and the feeling of grit. Even though Sophia had been rescued, the truth about my parents and the plan they have in place, the decision to poison their own daughter had been made, out in the open, I was aware that this was also the starting point. But at least for the time being, it was no longer balanced, as the person who was
The person who was supposed to be the victim was suddenly the one retaining both the truth and the evidence reveals. On the other hand, Sophia remained still during my time in the intensive care unit, I sat in the hospital corridor, which was a striking white color. The fluorescent lights were being squinted by my eyes. Face that is tight. Incessantly, my phone was buzzing. Phone calls from the police, phone calls from reporters, as well as attorneys. Reports on at the time of Sophia's breakdown, a possible poisoning, an extravagant celebration of the Lee family's graduation had spread throughout the city of Chicago like the wildfire. The FBI involved in the official capacity. I was aware of there were other reasons besides the poisoning. In fact, it was the path that ultimately leads directly to the chemicals that were being tested inside of Lee Pharmaceuticals labs. I was still able to view, clearly it is, the manner in which my parents spoke in a whisper with the family attorney, the manner in which at the gathering, eyes followed my every move and watched me. According to my instincts, this was never merely a family disagreement. A plot was being hatched here. As a result, when the FBI and the Chicago police revolted against Lee Pharmaceuticals HQ with a search for an emergency on the other hand, I was not surprised. After the box containing documents, hard drives, and files, were stowed away and sealed off as if the entire troubled past of my family was comprised of being brought into the illuminated light. It was necessary simply a few days for those who specialize in toxicology to substantiate it. Compound that can be found in adverse consequences that are serious. After that, an email sent to the FBI from an unknown sender, scholar who had been involved with the project in the past. We were forced to alter he added in his letter, data. They forced us to conceal the negative ones. I am still in possession of the original reactions. Reports. I went back and read those sentences once more, caught between a sense of relief and fury. At long last, another individual had the bravery to speak. The Federal Bureau of Investigation followed the lead and discovered a previously unknown archive on the internal servers of the corporation, treasure troves of written evidence demonstrating that senior executives, the order had been placed by my own parents as well. Personnel to make up numbers and delete lab records, the deaths of animals, and the burying of liver toxicity warnings. As I performed the flip, my hands shook. All of the files that were copied through the misgivings that I had harbored for such a long time had ceased to be theories and had instead become facts. On the other hand, that wasn't the only thing. In addition, the environmental division was brought to light. Investigators spent their time in a warehouse in Joliet. Containers containing poisonous liquids that have not been handled, chemicals that are buried deeper than the ground itself. Forgery was used to create the shipment records. I was thinking about the EPA when I thought about the rivers that were contaminated, at which I had taken. Anger and rage rumbled in my chest like a giant fire. The video that Emily took when she was at the party additionally handed up to the authorities. On it, the moment when my mother, under the cover of darkness, slid something inside a champagne glass was handed to me by my father before. It seemed to me that the footage was not very clear. Although it was evident, the movement was unquestionable, as demonstrated by forensic examinations, that there were traces of the substance in the glass, the same experimental substance that is harmful. My wife and I were sitting in the questioning room. I maintained a calm yet uncompromising tone in my voice. My parents have always considered me to be a nuisance. In their favor, I declined to become a member of the company. I did not provide permission for them to shady business dealings, and all that night they went beyond merely attempting to tarnish my reputation. After that, they made an attempt to destroy my life. The Chicago Tribune published an article that was daring. CEO of a pharmaceutical company and front page headline, wife accused of conspiring to commit the crime. Fraud, murder, and the girl's murder violations of environmental laws. Photographs of Lee.
The headquarters of the pharmaceutical company shut with all of the news channels were saturated with FBI tape, transforming into a representation of the controversy. CNN, the entire New York Times published an article about it. It started out as a catastrophe that had occurred within the family, poised to cause a shockwave across the nation. Ethics in business and the moral decline of corporations, the people who are at the top of the social media game. A large number of comments referred to it as the worst example of parental treachery in a child's life. The new hashtag quickly spread like wildfire. For Harper and her family, the wildfire numbered justice. My name is Sophia, and I read each of the posts in turn. My eyes were in tears, and my hands were shaking. Eventually, at the federal courthouse several months later, official proceedings of the trials started in Chicago. The attention of the entire city has been focused on my parents, clad in black clothing, are the case. Lawsuits sat down at the table of the defendant. Their expressions were icy, as if they were still thought they were in charge. Their believed attorney for the defense increased his voice and said, "My clients are being framed." This was the case Harker says it was nothing but an accident. She manufactured this tale in order to bring her down parents and make the most of their wealth. I sat down. There I was, listening, my entire body shivering and stiff, but the prosecution was ready to proceed. They showed the video, which was part of the toxicological. In addition to the results, the forged documents and testimonials from employees of the company. A map of environmental conditions for staff. The screen was illuminated by contamination, which sent a murmuring that could be heard throughout the courtroom. The fragile and not yet completely developed Sophia regained consciousness and approached the witness stand. As I stood, I clenched my hands tightly together, observing her shaking form and listening to her voice. Although I was shaking, her sentences remained firm. Consumed the glass of wine that was offered. Within minutes, I was unable to breathe. I was so worried that I was passing away at the time of my own graduation party. As much as I'd like to believe it, I can't. This is the truth, and the courtroom is where it is. Sophia ceased to speak, and I caught a glimpse of. There was a spark of desperation in my father's eyes. As he stood up, his speech and his body language. There was a misunderstanding that led to the situation. There is a misunderstanding on the part of my daughter. We didn't intend to hurt our own child, but at the same time, we cannot. In that very instant, the prosecutor disclosed an email that my father had sent out was the final blow.
Directly to the research department. Remove any and all data pertaining to unfavorable reactions. Not, this project has been abandoned. In conclusion, following several weeks of testimony, and it was the jury that presented its reasoning, verdict of guilty on all counts of conspiracy accusation, to commit homicide, to conduct financial fraud, document falsification, as well as serious offenses in the area of environmental law. The judge ruled that his voice was firm and resonant, therefore his gavel was clear. They have been sentenced to the following: prison for a considerable period of time at the federal level. As a result, the assets of the corporation are frozen. The company, Leaf Pharmaceuticals, is categorized as the supervision of the court awaiting the dissolution. There was a sudden explosion of sound in the courtroom. Camera shutters, keyboards clattering, and other sounds accompanied by the buzzing of hushed conversations. I shut my at the same time as a single tear rolled down my. It was not out of pity, but rather because at the time, Sophia had at long last been able to uncover the truth. In the past, I had disregarded, and I had nearly annihilated, now stood as witnesses to the event that signified the full and total collapse of an empire, and when the dust after the trial was over, Chicago was still in commotion. Each and every day, the news was broadcast. Press Tribune of Chicago, national television, and each and every outlet. The names of my parents were now inextricably linked to terms such as murder, deception in the medical field, conspiracy, and pollution of the environment. The pharmaceutical industry, formerly recognized as the pride of the nation, the city's economy was formally taken over by the government. the freezing of its assets, and its future demolished. The absence of light that they had cast over me for such a long period of time, someone I thought I was unable to flee, and I had finally, ultimately, I was unable to experience delight as everything fell apart. Watching them fall, but there is a rare exception, I finally found myself at peace. For the very first time, fear was no longer a part of my life, and I no longer had to act as if I was not getting affected by the weight due to the judgment of others. Following the trial, I left my tiny flat in the downtown area and my family and I moved into the lakeside house. This was something that grandmother had left behind. House made of wood with the porch facing onto the glistening waves of Lake Michigan, which provided me a sense of calm that I hadn't experienced in a year. Since she was a toddler, Sophia has been living with, in addition to me, after she had recovered from her brush with my sister, the one who had been the one to lose her, once remained silent on the side closest to our parents, alternated her course of action. On the day when she was the one to bring her belongings into the house, watched me with a composure that I had never seen before, observed in the past. "I am unable to return to the company," she remarked, remaining oblivious to the events that took place. "This is my application to law school. My goal is to become an attorney who specializes in environmental law. I would like to make advantage of the efforts I make to protect people who do not have any help." I glanced at her, and for the first time in my life, I heard a voice. For the very first time, there was no sign of, "My eyes are filled with apprehension" or hatred. It was acknowledged that Sophia's most important, she had just turned her back on me, which was a betrayal, been born out of fear, but now she had overcome it. We made the decision to stand up, and we constructed a new life for ourselves within the confines of the lakefront mansion. We prepared coffee together in the mornings, side by side, walking barefoot over the floor that was covered in dew. I put water on the grass in the afternoons, inserted myself into the most significant undertaking of my life. The Community Support Foundation is concerned with life. The inheritance, which includes the portion of the estate after the court had correctly returned to me, I made the decision to not keep it for myself. The fund was instead founded to provide assistance, impacted communities as a result of my family's unlawful dumping, water and water restoration, the provision of medical care to numerous sources, awards given to persons who were poisoned, grants awarded to individuals who are pursuing a legal education, as well as public health. I was aware that only action that is immediate and long-lasting, could give real healing, not only for me but for the countless lives that have been ruined by the company. In the meantime, Sophia hurled herself through the window while she was getting ready for law school apps. I discovered her on numerous occasions. Her eyes narrowed as they crouched over the little wooden desk. Although red with fatigue, she continued to write, line after line. She looked at the clock one evening, facing me, her tone of voice unwavering with conviction. "I have wasted far too many years in. On the other hand, I'm going to change that from now on. Transform your silence into strength in order to protect others." I responded with a gentle smile and said, "That's the best. To make amends in the greatest way possible. As opposed to myself, but for everyone else. To make amends. As well as on your own. Neither of us were two children anymore, fighting for a share of our parents' leftovers affection. We were allies who were not bound by any blood, but through mutual respect and trust and sort of family." Time came and went. The invitations started coming in for me to attend international conferences on the subject of concerning social justice and ethics in business. The one I was standing in a spectacular place on a cool fall morning, hall in Geneva, where in front of hundreds of activists, journalists, and academics are included. I dressed in a garment of a dark blue color, the stage lights forceful yet kind, grabbing my face in its grasp. When the microphone started working, I started speaking with a straightforward reality. I used to think that the importance of family cannot be overstated. Blood would be able to always take precautions to protect blood in the event that parents never pose a threat to their own children. However, I was taught a humiliating lesson. It is not blood that